Hello everyone, I'm Sebastian Y and this is Principles of Micro. In this video we're going to talk about consumer preferences. Preferences are what tells us which bundle a consumer likes better compared to others. Consumers' goal will be to select the bundle that they prefer the most given the budget constraint that we talked about in the previous video. We're going to continue on with our consumer who consumes bundles of rum and bananas, which we represent with the ordered pair RB. R is the amount of rum they consume, and B is the number of bananas they consume. As with the budget constraint, we're going to draw graphs to represent a consumer's preferences. I'm going to put R on the horizontal axis and B on the vertical. The way that we represent consumers' preferences on the graph is with indifference curves. I'm going to draw a sample indifference curve. They generally look something like that. An indifference curve connects all the bundles that give the consumer the same amount of satisfaction. We usually call that utility. If I mark out a few bundles on this indifference curve, each of those bundles has some amount of bananas and some amount of rum. Some have more bananas, some have less bananas, some have more rum, some have less rum. But all of these bundles have one thing in common: the consumer is indifferent between them. They get the exact same amount of satisfaction. They'd be equally happy being at any of these 3 points or any of the points in between or at any other point along this blue curve. But remember, this indifference curve represents just one level of utility. The consumer might end up with more or less utility than that, depending on which bundle they consume. I'll draw in another indifference curve, looks something like this. This indifference curve represents another level of utility, and if we mark out a few points along that indifference curve, the consumer would be equally happy between any of these points along the green curve. But how do those bundles compare with the bundles on the blue curve? Well, they are better. They give the consumer more utility because this indifference curve is up and to the right of the blue one. In general, the bundles on the green curve have more stuff in them than the ones on the blue curve. For example, compare these 2 points right here. The one on the green curve has both more bananas and more rum than the one on the blue. It has to be better. Likewise, we could draw another indifference curve down here. All of those points are equally good, but they are less good than the ones on the original blue curve. Let's draw up a fresh graph of an indifference curve. I'm going to plot out 3 points along this indifference curve, which I will call A, B, and C. Each of them has a particular amount of bananas and a particular amount of rum. Notice that the indifference curve slopes downward. If the consumer moves from bundle A to bundle B, they give up some bananas. In order to maintain the same level of utility, they need to get more rum in exchange for that. Then likewise, if the consumer were to move from bundle B to bundle C, they are giving up bananas, and they have to get rum in exchange to maintain that same level of utility or satisfaction. The slope of the indifference curve tells us the rate at which the consumer is willing to give up bananas in exchange for a unit of rum. This is called the marginal rate of substitution, or the MRS for short. In an intermediate micro class, you would mathematically calculate the equation for the MRS, but for our purposes, I will just give this one to you. And in our example, let's suppose that our marginal rate of substitution is 2B over R. Remember that B and R are the amounts of bananas and rum that we're currently consuming. What I want you to see with this is that B is in the numerator and R is in the denominator. If we have a lot of bananas and not very much rum, the MRS is going to be a big number, meaning that the consumer is more than happy to give up a lot of bananas in exchange for rum. They already have a lot of bananas and not a lot of rum. But think about it the other way. If we had not very much banana and a lot of rum, the MRS is going to be a relatively small number. If we already have a lot of rum and not a lot of bananas, we would not be very willing to give up bananas in exchange for rum. I'm going to draw another graph here, a little bit better to scale. We're going to consider 2 different points, one with 36 bananas and 2 rum, and another with 4 rum and 9 bananas. These two bundles are on the same indifference curve. That means as I sketch in our indifference curve, it needs to go through both of those points. Our MRS is given by the equation 2b over r. The MRS represents the negative of the slope of the indifference curve at any given point. So let's calculate that out for our two bundles. At the first bundle, we have 2 rum, 36 bananas. So the MRS is going to be 2 times 36 divided by 2, which is 36. At our second bundle, we are at 4 and 9. Our MRS is going to be 2 times 9 over 4, which is 4.5. Just like we talked about before, the MRS is higher when we have a lot of bananas and not very much rum, but it's lower when we have fewer bananas and more rum. That means as we go from left to right along our indifference curve, the MRS is going to get smaller and the slope is going to get flatter, which is exactly what we see on the graph. If I draw a tangent line at each of these bundles, you can see that the tangent line is flatter at the second point than at the first point, and these tangent lines have slopes equal to the negative of the MRS. So negative 36 slope over there, and the MRS is 4.5. Down here, the slope will be negative 4.5. Remember, the interpretation of this is at our first bundle, our consumer would be willing to give up bananas for rum at a rate of 36 to 1, whereas at our second point, they're only willing to give up bananas at a rate of 4.5 bananas per rum. The implication of this is that generally, consumers like to have a good mix of goods in their bundle. While it's possible to get a lot of utility by consuming a huge amount of one good and not much of the other, it's usually more efficient to have a mix. The exact mix that a consumer will prefer depends on their own preferences, but also the prices, as we will see very soon. That's what we need to know about preferences for now. In the next video, we'll put it all together and do the process of utility maximization.